the last ship in a convoy of 3 carrying hundreds of migrants caught up in a political controversy has now arrived in port. Now, this was the scene a short time ago in Valencia as the Italian naval vessel reached the dock. On board, 270 of the more than 600 migrants plucked from the Mediterranean Sea last weekend by the charity ship Aquarius. Safe from treacherous waters, the migrants became the subject of an international wrangling over which country would accept and process them. France has joined Spain in agreeing to do exactly that. A little earlier, the migrants aboard another vessel were ushered ashore. Days of debate over their fate left a group short on food and many in poor health. Now the migrants were rescued off the coast of Libya. The Aquarius first tried to dock in Italy, but the country's new coalition government turned it away. So did the authorities on the island nation of Malta. The ship eventually docked a few hours ago after Spain's new socialist government agreed to process the migrants. Dominic Valitis is tracking the developments for us from London. So, Dominic, Aquarius, the convoy have reached Valencia. Walk us through what's happening in the process there right now.
Well, Natasha, more than 2,000 Red Cross workers, volunteers, translators and health officials are now helping those migrants who arrived in Valencia, as you say, on 3 ships this morning. They were originally on just the one ship, the Aquarius, the boat which rescued them off the coast of Libya last weekend, but they were split up and put onto 3 in all to make the journey from the Mediterranean, through the Mediterranean to Spain safer. Those 2 other ships belonging to the Italian Coast Guard and Navy. The migrants have come from 26 countries in all, most are from sub-Saharan Africa, but there are others from Afghanistan, from Pakistan and Bangladesh as well. And among their number are 23 unaccompanied minors, 11 younger children under the age of 13 and 7 pregnant women. Now, they'll be given medical checks, psychological help if required, and of course medical assistance as well. And after that, police will identify them before taking them to police stations to start immigration procedures. Here's a UN spokesperson with a little more detail about what happens next.
UNHCR is present at the registration point, supporting the authorities precisely to identify vulnerable cases, to see who could be a victim of trafficking, smuggling, victims of torture, and particularly those in need of international protection that should be channeled through the asylum procedures.
It has been a tough week for these migrants, Natasha. They spent some 20 hours in overcrowded, leaky rubber dinghies before being rescued off the coast of Libya last weekend. And then they had to make a diversion after Italy and Malta refused to allow their ship, the Aquarius, to dock. A 700 nautical mile diversion to Spain, more than a week at sea in some pretty rough conditions, with many on board suffering acute seasickness as a result, Natasha.
Now, Dominic, this is a major international crisis that's taking place. How are the various countries responding?
Well, if we look back over the week, and the incident with the Aquarius itself, of course, sparked a bitter war of words between France and Italy, where a populist coalition government's taken a hard-line approach to immigration. Italy, of course, is on the front line of Europe's migrant crisis. Greece is another example. And countries like these are really struggling to cope with all of this. They want to see others in Europe sharing some of the burden. Migration reform within the European Union is now a key issue. What that will look like, though, is unclear. It is early days, but both Italy and France have suggested setting up centres in Africa itself to process asylum claims before people actually arrive in Europe. So there is appetite for change, a willingness for change. Most agree that the burden now has to be shared more equally among EU member states, and it is expected to be the hot topic at a meeting of EU leaders later this month.
Christophe Gambier is watching this story closely. He is a researcher on migrants, asylum seekers and refugees at sea at Leiden University in the Netherlands. Christophe, thank you for making time for us today. I wonder if we can begin with the issues that need to be managed today, which is how do the people get processed, and specifically all of those unaccompanied minors who were on board that ship. What happens to these people?
Okay, hi there. So normally there are now some standard procedures which are put in motion. So the most urgent thing will probably be medical care As you mentioned, there will be accompanied minors. So what they're going to do there is try to identify them and make sure they have specific protection. For instance, they will probably be separated in a safe environment, for instance, away from males. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. In terms of further processing of unaccompanied minors, that is something that takes place further once they will start up asylum procedures.
You know, Christoph, this becomes a huge undertaking, checking each of these individuals' health, their background, the criminal checks that need to take place, whether or not they will qualify to become refugees within European borders. And Italy has taken on much of the brunt of responsibility in the past few years with this migration crisis into Europe. But they're also receiving a number of criticisms for the way they've been reacting over the past few weeks. What do you make of how Italy is responding?
Well, in a way, you might have predicted that the new government, which has a more populist stance, would be harsh on new arrivals of migrants. But really, there has been a build-up for many years now with migrant flows mostly arriving at the European states in the periphery, mainly Italy and Greece. So I think there might be some sentiment building up about feeling abandoned by the other European states in terms of sharing the burden. So,
is that true?
Of course,
from your assessment? Are the other EU member states doing what they need to help alleviate some of the stress on these coastal countries?
Well, in 2015-16, we had very large amounts of migrants arriving. And then European states promised to relocate some of those to other EU member states for asylum processing. And EU member states were supposed to make pledges indicating how many migrants they can take on. But that process has been very, very hard. And the reality is that most asylum seekers are still stuck in camps in Greece and in Italy.
We spoke to a representative from the International Migration Organization, which is, of course, affiliated with the UN, earlier in the week. And he said in the past 2-3 years, the vast majority of these asylum seekers that are coming to European shores from the Mediterranean do not qualify. And then many of them go underground. So how does that process get sorted out by the various European countries?
So indeed, there's a large part that does not qualify for refugee status, or what they call subsidiary protection. And so there's this phenomenon, what they call absconding, and that is where people, like you said, they sort of disappear, and this is because they try to move on up to countries like Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium. Europe wants to propose a new legislation to sort of more punish people who move on, who get off the radar, which will limit their chances in the asylum procedure. But that might not be the solution. The solution would probably be to, from the beginning, have more flexibility on where asylum seekers can go for asylum processing. And so it would be good, for instance, if their views and preferences are taken more into account.
The number of migrants crossing the Mediterranean to Europe has fallen in the past couple of years. In 2015, over 1 million people risked that perilous journey. So far this year, just over 37,000 people crossed. 784 died trying to reach Europe. Spain, Greece, and Italy are accepting the vast majority of these refugees.